Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rox and today I'm just going to be going over every single book I read in 2020. It wasn't as good as a year reading here, but it still went fairly well, so it's fine. I achieved some goals, some I didn't, but I'm going to go through all of that now. With every year, there's going to be some like really good books, there's going to be some really not great ones, and then there's just going to be ones that you don't really remember. So open in front of me right now, I have my Goodreads. And I'm just going to try and say like 1 to 2 sentences about each book. The main stats I'm getting here is that for 2020, I read 67 books. I would have loved to read more, but 67 is, I feel, a fair amount. And that is 18,246 pages. I tend to stick with books that are quite thinner, fewer pages, shorter books. That is my thing. That's why I'm comfortable. I like books that are short. So that's a conscious choice. I don't need really to change it. I'm not looking to change it. So that does mean that the average length of a book I read is 272 pages. That's fairly short, but I'm fine with that. The shortest book I read was Hair Love, and the longest book I read was Grown Ups by Marian Keyes, which also happened to be one of my favorite books for the year. The most popular book I read for 2020 is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Adam Douglas. It's like a classic, so everyone knows about it more or less. And then my least popular book, with only 4 people having read it, is A Wolf in Skarpsklere. But it's more like a illustrated idiom dictionary. But I like reading it because, first of all, I feel like, learning idioms is always a good thing, and it's illustrated in a really fun way, so I enjoyed that. In addition to it being the shortest book I read this year, it was also the highest rated on my Goodreads, and that was Hair Love. And then my average rating was 3.8, which I'm fine with. Obviously, I would like it to be higher. So let's see if 2021, I can increase that. I would like to increase that. Now, let's get into all the books I read. The first book I read for the year was To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. I think I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It gave me Pirates of the Caribbean vibes. It is about a mermaid or a siren who kind of needs to kill men, but has a little change of heart, and she's then punished by being turned into a human by her mom. I thought it was a very nice standalone fantasy, so that's why it's cool. Next, I read Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig. Also very enjoyable, not as much. It deals more with like mental health. Then I read The Pearl by John Steinbeck. I really liked Of Mice and Men, so I thought I'd enjoy The Pearl. It was okay. Very sad actually. Illuminate by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. Highly recommend. It's told in a really cool format. Gave it 4 stars. Very adventurous. It's the first in the series, and I do want to continue the series. Then my first 5-star book for the year was Snow, Glass and Apples by Neil Gaiman and Colleen Doran. It's basically a Snow White retelling. Then I read The Picture of Dorian Gray, Dracula by Bram Stoker, and Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. So these are all classics because I really want to get through my list of all the classics that I want to read. So I read all of these. My favorite was definitely Dracula. So cool. Oh my gosh. I was very disappointed by Picture of Dorian Gray. It didn't give me what I expected. Then I read The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois, and I was surprised. I didn't know much about it before going into it. It's non-fiction mostly, but there's like 1 chapter that is a fictionalized story. For a book club, I read My Sister the Serial Killer by Aweh and and then Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. Both of them 4 stars. Really good books. Both very different. The serial killer one is more not thrillery. And you look at that cover and you think thriller, but it's not really thriller. But it's also very funny. Like, I think it's messy, it's messy. And then Eleanor Oliphant, I really enjoyed it. It's character driven, and those tend to be my favorite stories. The Poet X was the next one I read, and also I listened to the audiobook for that one because it is told in verse, and the author, Elizabeth Acevedo, is a slam poet, so she narrates the audiobook. So if you're going to read that one, I'd recommend the audiobook. Then I went through a few autobiographies, specifically Gabrielle Union's We're Going to Need More Wine, Over the Top by Jonathan Van Ness, and then Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. My favorite of all 3, I don't think I can choose between Over the Top and Need More Wine. Man, Over the Top was actually really good, which I never watched the show. I think it's called Queer Eye. I've never seen it. I do want to watch it eventually, but I haven't seen it. I just read the book. So I still found it very interesting. So I think even if you're not a fan of the show, you can still give that a shot. Down Among the Sticks and Bones was also one of my favorite books of the year. Then I read Neverworld Wake by Marisha Pessel. It was a bit confusing in the beginning, but I definitely got the story. I know I enjoyed it, but right now as I'm sitting here, I'm like, I can't remember much about it, which is actually very weird because I really enjoyed it when I read it. Read It Bone Wide by Jacqueline Wilson is another one I read, and it is very, the writing in it is very poetic, so I'd recommend it for that reason. Just for fun, I read this really weird book called Harry Potter and the Chamber of Serpents. It was fun. Highly recommend it. I actually wish this author would kind of write these parodies to all the books in the Harry Potter series, because they're told from the perspective of an American student who first, when he gets this letter, he's like, oh, it's a magic school, so like for magicians, and he doesn't think wizards straight away. All our characters are still there, specifically Harry Potter and his friends, the Golden Trio, they're all there, but we kind of told the same story just from an outside perspective. Next we have Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. It was the first book I read by her, and it's one that's been on my list very long. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. I gave it 3 stars, which is very average. I liked it. It wasn't bad. Then I just kind of binged the rest of the Wayward Children series, specifically Beneath the Sugar Sky, In an Absent Dream, and Come Tumbling Down, all by Sean Maguire. This is book 3, 4, and 5 in the series. I love the series, so I can't say much about it. Next up, we have Jane Anonymous, which was one of my most anticipated releases, and it definitely lived up to my expectations. I've never read anything by this author, but I still read the premise of this book and I thought it was very interesting, and it definitely delivered. It was a very intense book. So this girl gets kidnapped, but from the beginning of the book, you know she's back at home. Obviously, you don't know how she gets kidnapped, what happens while she's gone from home. But the book starts off when she's back at home, and I'm so grateful for that, because it would have been so stressful not knowing if she comes back, because it was already pretty intense. But I definitely really liked it. Next we have a book I didn't read on my Goodreads, and that's The Hidden Power of Fucking Up by the Try Guys. I didn't rate this one because I don't think it's necessarily a great book, but as a fan of the Try Guys, it's for someone like me. The thing is also, I already knew all the stories more or less because I watched their YouTube channel, follow it. But I think for someone coming from the outside, you don't know anything about the Tribe Guys, you learn a lot from the book, but I don't know if you enjoy it. Also, again, for this one, I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by all 4 guys, and it was just fun. It was like watching one of their YouTube videos. Then I read another one that I was actually read 2 books straight after each other, both made my favorites of the year list, and one is Kamiho by Kat Chong, which is an urban-based fantasy set in Seoul, Korea, and then I read Where the Crawdad Sings, which is a historical fiction, which is a genre I kind of think I don't like, but then I always end up giving those books 4 or 5 stars. So Where the Crawdad Sings was a bit more serious, but I kind of read both books at the same time, so it was a very good, if Where the Crawdad Sings got a bit too sad for me, I would go to Gamiho, which really gave me all the Korean drama vibes. I've already spoken about these 2 books. So next up, I read Rolling in the Deep by Mira Grant, which is the prequel for her book Drowning in the Deep. Drowning Deep? I really want to read that one, so I thought I'd get into the prequel, and I really enjoyed it. It was actually very scary. Those moments that I referred to in that book, hell's creepy, hell's scary. Next up is The Fire on High, also by Elizabeth Azevedo, which I was very disappointed by. Gave it 2 stars. I did not like it at all. I didn't like the main character. I didn't like the writing. I couldn't connect with the story. I feel like there was a lot of girl hate in it, and I just did not enjoy that story. Then I read a poetry collection, Pillow Thoughts by, I think it's called Courtney Pimpernel. I listened to the audiobook with my sister. It's very romance based, which don't tend to be my favorite poems, but it is what it is. The Silent Patient, very disappointed by this book. It is a thriller, and it was very hyped. It won the Goodreads Choice Awards for thriller the year it came out. I don't know. So I was obviously very excited to read it. I didn't like the plot twist. I found the story just very slow, and I think for a thriller, I want it to be fast-paced. This one wasn't. But a lot of people still like it, so if you like it, that's fine. And I think I'd still recommend it, because a lot of people I know really like it. But for me personally, no. And I think that story could have gone places to just elevate it a bit more, but it didn't. My Dog Vanessa. It's actually a book I made a video on, and I never ended up posting it. That is a very dark book. Oh, it's called My Dog Vanessa. It is a very serious book. It's about a girl who's 15 years old, and her teacher at this boarding school starts a relationship with her, but he definitely initiates it. And then years later, when she's, I think, in her 30s, she kind of reflects back on this relationship, because now there are things coming out about this teacher and that he might have done the same thing to other girls. Trigger warning for pedophilia and rape if you plan on reading that book. The first half of it was very good, but I just ended up being so disappointed in the story. But I think I don't want to discourage anyone from reading that book. In fact, I encourage you to read that book. Kingdom of Needle and Bone, also by Mira Grant. If you didn't know, Mira Grant is Shannon Maguire's pen name. So the Wayward Children series, the author of the Wayward Children series is the author of Rolling in the Deep and this Kingdom of Needle and Bone. I regret reading that one when I did, because it is about a pandemic, and I read it at the start of the pandemic, and I just kind of, I don't know why, but I forgot everything in that book. I don't know if I blanked it out on purpose, but I cannot remember anything from that book. Then I got into Pet by Aweh, which is the first book I read by the author, and I really enjoyed it. The writing was especially fantastic. It was very lyrical, very poetic. And I definitely will definitely read other books by the author. I'm interested in that. The Fox and the Star was just a short picture book I read, really enjoyed it. Ninth House by Lee Bardugo, which once again was one of my favorites for the year. I think dark academia might be my thing. But also the cults. I think I enjoy cults in books. It's something that I'm learning about myself and my reading taste. Next up we have Ring by Koji Suzuki. It was a little scary. I definitely found it scary, but for me, I found it more of a thriller, especially towards the middle of the book. It's only like the first chapter was very scary, but from there on out, it's more thriller and more mystery than anything else. Then we have Death Note, volume 1 and 2. The first manga I read, and I have no regrets on that one. Fire Like You by Upile Chisala, which is by far my favorite of all her poetry collections. I've read all 3 of them now. I think there are only 3 out. The other 2 were okay, but this one, Fire Like You, definitely one of my favorite. Then we get to the book I made a video on, and it's my most viewed video on my channel, and that is The Haunted Vagina by Carlton Malik III. I have a full video on this and all my thoughts on this book, so you can watch that one if you know that. I don't know where I am on it. All These Beautiful Strangers. Oh yes, that was a fun book. I do not regret reading that one. I really like the character. She's very unlikable, but towards the end she makes this decision that I was just so proud of her for making. Good story. It's more like I would call it a bit of a mystery, a YA mystery, but it's really very nice. I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. I was so disappointed in that book. I think it was one of the books I've been looking forward to reading most for a very long time. I've been looking forward to reading that book, and it did not live up to expectations. I found it very boring. I didn't like the lessons. Again, it was one of those books that I thought, or that I felt could go places where it just never ended up going. Be Not Far From Me by Minnie McGinnis. Again, it was one of my most anticipated books for the year, and I have a full video on it again, but I ended up giving it 5 stars. I've only read 2 books by her, but I gave both of them 5 stars. She's a good author, I think. She tends to write very sad books though. Next up we have Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. Again, brilliant. It's a fantasy novel. It has some transgender representation, gay representation, Latinx representation, and it's all own voices, so obviously that's great. It was one of my favorite books I read for the year, and it definitely put me in a mood of wanting to read more books like this. So if you have any recommendations of books that you thought were quite similar to Cemetery Boys, please let me know. I want to read that. I'm thinking of ending things. I gave it 5 stars, but you're gonna ask me what that book is about. I don't know, so don't ask me. It's very confusing. There's a movie on Netflix. I also watched the movie. The 2 are very different, and they will not help you understand each other. So if you've watched the movie and you're hoping the book will help you, no. If you've read the book and you are hoping the movie will help you, also no. I was there for the ride, you know. You can sometimes be there for the ride and not have like no idea what's going on. That was me. The Eternal Audience of One, which was my favorite book of 2020. Wow, I feel like I read a lot of my favorites very close to each other. That book is so good. Highly recommend. I kind of want everyone to read it. It's just this epic novel. It's set here in Windhoek and some of it in Cape Town, but there are a lot of scenes that are from various places in the world. Specifically, it's in Rwanda, France, Belgium. It's just, I think I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting some places, but I would really want you to read that book. Alice Hartley's Happiness. This is the first book I read by Philippa Gregory. It was one of those books where I was like, what the F? They were like, I think it was a sex cult. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. You look at this cover and you're like, oh, I don't expect there to be people giving like birth with dolphins. That does happen in this book. It's wild, man. People are putting dolphins in the back of cars. This one lady just kills a cat because the cat's vibe is off. So, next we have I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. It's told from two perspectives, following these girls. One's black, one's white. And there's this riot breaks out. Racial tensions are very high, and these two girls kind of now have to help each other get through the night. Then I read Bully by Penelope Douglas, my first Penelope Douglas book. I was so disappointed with this book. It felt like it was some sort of fan fiction for I don't know what. I also didn't appreciate how young the characters are, but they're just so like, I don't want to say mature, but this guy's like a sex god, but he's like 17. Come on. I just couldn't take it seriously. Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, another one of my all-time favorites. Woman at Point Zero. It's a little bit complicated, the backstory of the story, but the author of this book met a woman in jail, and then she kind of tells this woman's story. It's so sad, very heartbreaking. Soundless by Rochelle Mead doesn't even deserve my attention right now. It's one of those books that I definitely would not recommend to anyone. I'll never read it again. Not worth it. Don't bother. Forgive Me, I meant to do it was just a picture book. I was there, I read it. Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. I actually have a very, very, very long review on this one. One of my favorite self-help books I've read and would recommend. Usually I find self-help books to be useless. That was not the case with this one. I think it gives a lot of useful information. It gives you the tools to implement the changes or to implement these ideas or concepts, whatever, into your life. Of Wolfenskapsklehre, it's the one I just talked about, the picture book. It's so funny because then the next one I read was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So both my least popular and most popular book. Hitchhiker's Guide, it's a classic. What are you gonna say? I enjoyed it. It was actually very funny. Grown Ups by Marian Keyes. First Marian Keyes book. Highly recommend. It follows a family. Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. This was the first book by Elizabeth Acevedo that I gave 5 out of 5 stars. So good. This one was also told in verse. It takes place both in I think it was New York and then in the Dominican Republic. All Boys Aren't Blue. It is a young adult memoir. Incredible. Hair Love is another one I read. It's so short, so I really can't say much on it. The Black Flamingo. It goes into drag culture, again, blackness, queerness. Our main character is mixed race, I believe, but he lives with his white mother. He goes through a lot of different experiences and yeah, it just opens your eyes to a different community. It's one of those books that I again feel can make you a little bit more empathetic. Her Body and Other Parties. This is a short story collection. I didn't like it as much as I thought it would. A lot of the stories just did not make sense to me. I think it went over my head. I was not smart enough for this novel. Kim Ji-young, born 1982, was another one of my favorites. Follows Kim Ji-young, which was the most common name for a woman born in the 1980s in Korea. So she becomes the face of every woman, and the book explores all the discrimination she faces and the misogyny just for being a woman in Korea. But I think you can apply it to a lot of other places in the world. Ring Shout, oh my goodness, Ring Shout was a short story, a horror short story. It deals with these monsters, but the monsters are like the Ku Kluxes. So they come from the Ku Klux Klan. It goes into like the discrimination in the US, but it's more fantasy. But yeah, very good. Coconut by Kopana Matloa. I do plan on reading her other books, although this one I didn't find as interesting. Still, there are 2 main stories in it. One I really enjoyed, the other one I felt a bit boring, but explores race and being black in a post-apartheid South Africa. You Should See Me in a Crown. That was so much fun. It's so sweet. It's a book about this black girl, queer black girl, in a predominantly white school and her experiences. She struggles financially, so she's entering this run for prom queen so that she could win a scholarship to go to school. So we just follow along with all her adventures. And the last book I read for the year was The Final Exit. How applicable. It's a non-fiction book about the practicalities of euthanasia and assisted suicide. So definitely not a book for everyone. So there you have it, all the books I read in 2020. Have you read any of these? Do you plan on reading any of these? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again later. Okay, bye.